Hey, Bobby Manning here, CLNS Media, and we're in New York. No special apparel this time, just my sweater to stay warm here, the CLNS official. And I'm here. Day before the Celtics and Knicks tip off tomorrow night, we'll be live with coverage on Celtics All Access, Celtics on CLNS, and of course the Garden Report. I want to talk about the season, because of course this is going to be the first game of the season, and as always we got to come up with some storylines, some things to look for throughout the year. I wrote about Ime Udoka's training camp on CLNS Media last week, and I also have an article corresponding with this story to go more in depth. But just to introduce some of the things I'm going to be looking for this season. Number one, how can it not be Jayson Tatum? Jayson Tatum is obviously going to swing this team's fortunes this year. If he is an MVP candidate, which we haven't quite seen, I think him at his peak last year for I'd say the 5 or 6 games when he was scoring at an elite level, maybe a legendary level if you think of a 60-point game and a 50 in the playoffs. Those are the kind of performances it's going to take to thrust the Celtics deep into a home court position, 3 seed, 2 seed, to overperform to that extent. I think Tatum is going to, of course, have to be an MVP candidate in that regard. And it makes me think of the Garden Report Dome Theory crossover we did last night. I was making cases for Jokic, Luka, Embiid, even Kyrie Irving has a case here, Damian Lillard, Joel Embiid, some of the best, not all of them young, but rising stars in the game right now have already put themselves in the position to be top 75 players ever. And if you look at Jayson Tatum, who's youngish, but a handful of years into his career at this point, he doesn't really have a case at all as they start to roll out this top 75 players in NBA history list. He's going to have a season here that firmly puts him on the edge of that list. Could we say top 100 all time? That's the kind of season he's going to have here, or in the next 2 years, to really start to feel good about him being a Joel Embiid, Jokic MVP level player, Giannis. I don't think anybody's going to be a Giannis, but if he gets closer to Giannis, we can talk about this Celtics team no matter what happens around Tatum being a championship contender. So can he make that kind of step here? He had a lot of weight on his shoulders last year. I think he's got better facilitators. Not a ton of shooting around him, but he's gained weight, has gotten great at getting to the free throw line. We saw it with Trae Young last year. That can be enough to thrust you into elite status. So that's a big number one. Number two, Jaylen Brown. Come on, we're going down the roster here. This isn't the Garden Report. We're not going from the two-way guys up like we do on the Garden Report postgame show. Jaylen Brown, his usage this year, we only saw him in one preseason game before he got diagnosed with COVID. He's questionable officially now for tomorrow. How are they going to use him? We saw some good end-to-end corner action. He scored 16 points in the first 8 minutes of that preseason game against Orlando in the opener before he went down. I need to see a massive year out of Jaylen Brown. I don't have any doubt that Brown, skill-wise, physique-wise, readiness-wise, is going to be able to do that. I mean, we saw him lead the NBA in points last year when he was running the show with Jayson Tatum in and out of the lineup early last year. Can his usage, can his role lend him to be scoring 20 to 30 points every single game like he's capable of, pushing all-NBA status? My bold prediction this year, one of them for the Celtics, is I think Brown can reach near all-NBA status, like where Tatum was this year. I think he can be pushing the top 20 of the NBA in terms of scoring and wing defense. He's got defenders around him to help him reach that upper echelon of defense again. And man, out of all the pillar players on the Celtics last year, as they call them now, he struggled immensely on the defensive end, getting caught looking off the ball, getting beat one-on-one by his man. Just any area, I think exhaustion came into play, but he wasn't himself on the defensive end. And those Kawhi comparisons, those are going to go out the window quick if Brown doesn't become a great defender in this league. So there's a lot leaning on him, of course, too. Another thing I'm interested in, double big lineup. I think that's where the Celtics are headed to start this year. In fact, hate it or love it, I think Grant Williams is going to be starting in Al Horford's place tomorrow at the 4 with him officially out for this game. Matchups will always come into play, but I think more often than not the Celtics are going to start games with that double big action. I hate calling it double big action, but I haven't come up with another name yet. We'll figure it out. The 2 big passers. That's not catchy at all. We're gonna test a lot of different things as this year goes on, because this isn't Daniel Tice, this isn't Tristan Thompson. These are 2 great passers, facilitators, and in Horford's case, a great big man shooter who bring a ton more versatility than we saw with some of the other players here. So I'm going to be looking at the double big lineup, seeing what that's capable of, and if the Celtics are able to stick with it. And that brings me to my next one here, the young guys on the team, because, of course, another one of my bold predictions is that Payton Pritchard's going to make that starting lineup by the end of the year. That means one of those bigs has to go. I'm not going to make a bold take on whether it's Horford or Rob right now, because to get to that point, Payton Pritchard's going to have to prove he can be a starting level player on this team. And that's something I'm looking for immensely right now with this team. They need his shooting. They need someone to stand up as a shooter this year, really emerge in that aspect of their game. So the young guys on this team, Romeo made big strides in the preseason. Aaron Nesmith showed capable of 20-point per game scoring. Those are all things that this team could need off the bench. I mean, who's to say that one of those young wings can't pass a Josh Richardson on this team? I got a friend kicking up some dirt here, German Shepherd. Anyway, Payton Pritchard's going to be one of the top 10 things I'm looking for, of course, this year as we go along here. Veterans, important too, though. Dennis Schroeder, I think it's evident the way Ime Udoka has talked about them having conversations with free agents who came in this year and just roles, balance between the starters and the bench. Schroeder's going to be coming off the bench this year. He got his nice spot start in that preseason finale and had that massive burst of scoring that got people really excited going into this year about that addition, but he's the stabilizer on this team that makes me think that they're going to be a firm playoff team, not a play-in team, a playoff team this year. So he's going to be a big part of that. With full reign on the bench, him being able to man those units and take a ton of shots, can he score 20 points a game? Can some of the facilitation around him, whether it's Al Horford in second units, Jason Tatum mixing in with those groups, can those guys free him up for looks that are so good that he can shoot in the high 30% from three again? Then we're really talking about this being a special signing for the Celtics. But even if he's his usual driving and finishing self that we saw in that preseason game against the Heat, that's going to be a huge deal for this team going into this year. And then I'm looking at the coaching. Can this team coach and establish a new culture, whether it's Ime Udoka, Damon Stoudemire, Will Hardy, any of these guys? I obviously wrote about the firm rules and the tough stance that Ime has taken on things, whether it's a missed fight for Marcus Smart getting suspended for a preseason game or Grant Williams getting pulled from a game for complaining to the refs. Is that line going to remain firm? Is it going to be equal? Will Jason Tatum get pulled from games for complaining to refs? I mean, that's really the line that Udoka has set himself out on by doing something like that in the preseason. Now, that can change in a regular season in a clutch situation, but I think that we're starting to see him really take on a different persona from Brad. And does that start to show to the players that this guy's taking care of business here? Maybe I'm frustrated with this guy and what he's doing. Is my coach going to step in and take care of this? So maybe I don't have to. Because, of course, Tatum Brown, they're still learning how to be vocal. They're still learning and embracing, to some degree, that leadership role on this team, whether they're going to be captains or not. We've talked about that. So Udoka, is he going to get through to players? Is he going to resonate in this room? Is he going to grow tired with how tough he can be here? I mean, this is something these players wanted, so I don't think that's going to happen. But it's a long season. We're back to 82 games. Can he be tough throughout the entire course of this one? That's what I'm going to be watching for immensely here. Of course, minor point, this isn't until later in the season, but they do have that $17 million TPE. That's an extremely flexible way to be able to add to this group. I don't like trading in Fournier for Richardson, even though it's offense for defense. I think Fournier was a better player. But now if we're talking about Richardson plus a deadline addition with even half of that, now we can talk. And all of a sudden you might be looking at a team that adds a shooter here, a wing scorer. You can't fit a Harrison Barnes in this time around. That was a dream last year. I got excited about Eric Gordon until I realized he just misses that $17 million mark. So that's something we're going to be talking about all year in that regard. And then someone who's interesting to me too is Marcus Smart. We've been keeping an eye on Smart, who didn't talk a ton during training camp. But Chippy, little standoffish, I'd say, just seemingly not in a great mood to me. And I can't sense why. And does it connect to the situation he had where he missed a flight? Again, I've said it on the Garden Report. I don't have a good sense on how big of a deal that is yet. I haven't been on the beat long enough. Do guys miss fights sometimes? And that's just something that the Celtics made public here to try to make a statement to their team early on in the year. That's a possibility. Or is this so rare for that an 8-year veteran doing it is a sign of alarm? Mistakes happen. I think one missed flight in 8 years, if that is the case in Smart, can happen, especially for a preseason game where they left early. But also, it could be a sign that he's a little disconnected here early on. Frustrated maybe, just not 100% bought in with this group. What stuck out to me more than anything is him saying captains don't matter. The coach comes out and says, we're going to do captains this year. He's got this new idea. He's really excited. And all of a sudden, one of the pillars of the organization comes right out minutes after him and says, captains don't matter. We all know what we're doing here. We're all adults. We don't need captains, which... that's disconnectedness, at least in that situation to me. Now, I'm excited about Smart this year in that point guard role. I think he's the best passer on this team, and I think his skills are really going to be accentuated by playing that position, being emboldened in that position, and not having to jump back between wing roles, which he'll play sometimes in other units as they try to empower Tatum and Brown on the ball. Of course, that goes back to my Brown point. Brown needs some ball time this year. So Smart's going to have to space the floor. He's going to have to get back to being defense first. There's not as much offensive pressure on him this year. Schroeder's here. These young guys are stepping up as scorers. Horford is taking the load off him in many different areas. And is that guy who, as Jared Weiss wrote, I love this line, was in Smart's corner in terms of guys who established defensive accountability throughout the year. That's something that I'm going to be all over this year is Marcus Smart. I don't think I'll be the only one. Two left, they kind of go hand in hand. Rob Williams, dealing with knee tendinopathy. He's good to go for this opener tomorrow, or today as we speak. For me, he's got to stay healthy throughout the course of the year. Does he have to be dominant wall to wall? Does he have to play 35 minutes every game? No. In fact, I do think there'll probably be some level of management like we saw last year as he comes into the season with tendinopathy. I couldn't get a firm answer on that. That's just a guess that I'm making. A strong inference based on how they handled Rob Williams last year health-wise. So can he be out there every game playing 24 minutes a game, splitting them evenly with Horford? I think that'd be a huge success this year, and he'd make his money. Part of that incentive, $1.5 million that he's working toward. 69 games, I believe, is the total that he has to hit in that regard. Can he get there? Huge, huge question for Rob this year. Rob's this team's ceiling raiser. I know I said Tatum's MVP status is going to be important in that regard, but for Tatum to get there, he needs this floor-stretching big man who can get up, throw down alley-oops, and play off Tatum so well, the way that Rob does, and protect the rim while doing it. Rob didn't look good in the preseason. Shot 33%, didn't show great burst, dunked only once. If that's the Rob that's out there playing this year, and this is one of my bold predictions, we're going to see a lot more Al Horford this year than we are Rob Williams. But if he does reach that all-star form, and Zach Lowe wrote about him as one of the 5 biggest X factors in the NBA this year, all of a sudden we're talking about a team that's capable of making the NBA Finals here, between Tatum being an MVP candidate and Rob rising to near all-star level, which at his best last year when they were 8-3 with him in the starting lineup, I think he'd be a borderline all-star doing some of the stuff he did. 9 blocks in a game against Brooklyn. Right here, I wasn't in the house for that one. I was in the floor for the absolute blowout that followed. Number 10 relates to that. Health, COVID. Here we are again. Rob tendinopathy. Al Horford's out with COVID. Jaylen Brown's questionable with COVID. That was an ominous start to the year. I thought it was a good preseason on the court, off the court, between vaccines, a couple players possibly being unvaccinated according to Rolling Stone. Josh Richardson all but admitting he's unvaccinated in the early going here. And, of course, Al and Jaylen contracting the virus, testing positive, and missing almost the entire training camp. It's a tough start. And Ime Udoka admitted those guys being out of the lineup, those guys being out of the camp had a tremendous impact on the team here. So those are my 10 things we're looking for this year. If I only did 9, shout it down in the comments. Did that all off the dome. Bobby Manning, CLNS Media, Celtics All Access. We are live all the way through game day tomorrow, from shoot-around all the way through the final buzzer, and after on the floor at Madison Square Garden. We will see you there live. Make sure you subscribe to Celtics All Access, CLNS Media, and follow us across social media, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, all those spots. We'll talk to you tomorrow.